Okay, so we're in the middle of Yud Gimel Amud Beis, and we're behind, but we'll see how much we can do today. Maybe we could do a daf and a quarter to catch up to at least only be one daf behind. So we spoke about Mola Malilos and Mafarch Kitnios. Those are the sukkahs yesterday. How much you're allowed to do on Yantif. Now it talks about Mikalev. Tanan Rasan, a Mishnah and Maisros. Hamakalev Sorim. Over there, still on Maisra, not about Shabbos and Yantif. We'll get to that in a second. Here it says if somebody has Sorim that have a peel on it. It says, I guess it's a fact, but I saw in the Gemara Menachos that Sorim have a peel that cannot be eaten. When you want to eat raw barley, you have to take off the klipa. Wheat is not like that. So you can eat it without the klipa. That's why it talks about the klipa. Are you allowed to take off? The subject is going to be, are you allowed to take off the klipa of the barley on Shabbos? It's not. It's already off the stalk. It's not attached to the ground. It's not even on the stalk. You have the kernels, but each one has a peel on it. Are you allowed to take off the peel? So bring a Mishnah and Maisros that says, as far as eating the barley before it was ma'usar, before it was tied, you could peel one at a time and eat it, and that's mutter. It's not yet called Gmar Malacha. Rashi talks about Achila Sarai. Tosfos talks about is it considered a Gmar Malacha? But you're allowed to eat one at a time. But if you didn't do one at a time, you peeled a whole bunch, a handful, and now you want to eat them, then it's already chayiv in Meiser. Rashi will say because it's called Achilas Keva. Tosfos says that's because it's called Gmar Malacha. Anyway, that was as far as Meiser goes. The same distinction about eating one at a time or eating a handful applies to Shabbos also. That if you do one at a time, you're allowed to do it on Shabbos. I guess it's called Derech Achila, and you're allowed to peel one barley at a time and eat it. It's not considered doing malacha. Here, the malacha might be dash. If you're going to be separating the kernel from its husk, it might be considered dash. So it says one at a time is Derech Achila and it's mutter. But if you do a whole bunch, a handful, and then you want to eat it, then it's considered the regular derech and it's chayiv for dash. The Gemara is a kasha on that. Amy, is that true?
It's derech chayil. Derech who did the chayil?
No, I think it will be mamish dash.
It would be mamish dash, and with your hand, it's not dash.
We're not talking about with you.
With your feet, with your map. How you doing that?
You do it by hand. You take off the peel by hand. You take off the peel. If you do a lot of them, that's called dash. The fact that you dislodge the kernel from the peel, if you do a lot, that's dash. If you did only one at a time, it's derech achila. Rab's wife used to do cupfuls for him, and he used to eat on Shabbos. He would eat raw saurim, and his wife would peel the whole cupful. So you see that it's mutter. It's not only one at a time, and her handful is us. She did cupfuls. And also Rab's wife, Rab's wife also would make for him cupfuls of peeled barley on Shabbos. So you're saying that you're not allowed to do it. You chayiv. It says chayiv for Shabbos. And no, it says they did it.
Rebbe.
Yes, please.
I'm also bothered by what's behind Eliezer's kasha. Where do we see another Av Malacha where it's exactly the same act, but only quantity is koveh, it's a malacha or it's mutter? That doesn't make sense, does it?
Rashi says that it's kalach hayad. Rashi says it's kalach hayad. Not the regular way to do one at a time.
But then,
if it could be that the way you do, since you're doing such a small amount, so that's kalach hayad. The Gemara in Shabbos does say by Bora, the Gemara does say such a distinction, and some Amoram over there ask more or less your kasha. But here the Gemara does at this point. The Gemara held of it. The Gemara slugged it up and said, no, it's not even allowed. You're allowed to, but at the point that the Gemara did say this distinction, it says a difference if it's in the quantity.
But there's at least to be geyser. Why? Because an onlooker will see exactly the same act.
No, so it's not, he sees they do one at a time, so that's derech achila.
Can I just make a point, a very important point? Rashi says that the oichel upotem in a meiser. Rashi says chayiv divrei maskil b'meiser dahav lekva. So I don't think we're talking about malachas here.
No. The Gemara started off before a Mishnah and Meiser. Rashi just explained the Mishnah and Meiser, and then Rabbi Elazar said v'chein l'Shabbos. The Mishnah is talking about Meiser, but then the Gemara says V'chein l'Shabbos, and that's the Gemara's kasha that no, it does not apply to Shabbos. There's no question that it says it by Meiser. That was the Mishnah. But now the Gemara says that Rav Elazar, who said V'chein l'Shabbos, that's not true. The Gemara continues, Eli Yitmar Seif Yitmar. So when Rav Elazar was said something about Shabbos with the Mishnah and Meiser, he didn't mean this part about peeling barley. But it's going on the next part of the Mishnah over the end Meiser. The Mishnah continues over there, not about barley, now onto wheat. And here it's talking about that you have wheat that's been already separated from the stalks. That's Mola Malilos. You can't do that on Shabbos, but it isn't about Meiser again, nothing to do with Shabbos. It's talking about Meiser, that if he has these kernels that have been separated from the stalk, and now you have it mixed together with the psolas that came off. So, blow it a little bit at a time, separate it. And you could eat it, and it's potter from Meiser. Because again, it's going to be called derech achila sarva, not gemar malacha. You're allowed to eat it without taking off Meiser. But if you did a lot, and here it doesn't say a handful, here it says you put it into your lap, whatever, as much as you did, so then that's considered gemar malacha. Rashi says it's considered achila skeva, Tosfos says gemar malacha. Tosfos is more simple, with more coming up, we'll say gemar malacha. So that's a Mishnah. Meiser says, and it says that if you did a little bit, so then a little bit at a time, so then it's mutter, then it's not chayv and meiser. If you did a lot, it is chayv and meiser. And the Gemara says on this, the same distinction will be also as far as Shabbos goes. If you did a little bit, it's mutter on Shabbos. If you did a lot, then it's chayv. Masker Flora Baba Bamam, the Rachel and Meiser in the Shabbos low. Abba Bamam was going back to the first thing by peeling the barley. Why did the Gemara come out over there? That on Shabbos, you're allowed to do a lot. Like Rav's wife and Apil's wife, they did a whole cupful for him to eat on Shabbos. And even though by Meiser it says if you do a handful, it's already chayv and Meiser. That's called gemar malacha. But by Shabbos, you're allowed to do a lot. It's not considered a malacha. It's not the same thing. Don't make this correlation between Meiser and Shabbos. And the more saying, is there such a thing? Meiser baba mamo the Rachel and Meiser in the Shabbos low. It's only considered gemar malacha as far as Meiser goes, but a Shabbos is not considered malacha. He thought that it's all the same. Is there anything that exists like that? That by Shabbos is not considered a malacha, and by Meiser it is considered a gemar malacha that it should be chayv and Meiser? But the Gemara says yes. The Gemara is going to answer right away. Yes, there's no shaykhus, nothing to do with each other. He challenged him back. Below, is there no such thing? Yes, there are many things, and he's going to show you that there are kinds of things that are considered a gemar malacha for Meiser, that is considered the finishing process, and now you're not allowed to eat it. It's tevel. You're not allowed to eat it without tithing, but that doesn't mean that it's chayiv on Shabbos. Not every kind of gemar malacha is going to be malacha on Shabbos. I'll just preview what the Gemara is going to say. Is sometimes when you pile it up, that's also going to be considered gemar malacha for Meiser. That doesn't mean piling up things is going to, like most going to say, onions. You make a pile of onions, so that's called the gemar malacha for Meiser. That doesn't mean making a pile of onions is going to be chayiv on Shabbos. So that's how the Gemara comes out. That it's not related to two subjects. Below are there not things that are gemar malacha for Meiser and it's not a gemar malacha for Shabbos? For Garna Meiser, when a person considers the finished product for Meiser, the Tanan, what is considered the finished product for Meiser as far as foods go? The goren means making when you went by your goren, the granary. So when you take the grain and you shovel it up together to make a pile, that's considered the gemar malacha. What's the gemar malacha of other kinds of fruit? So it says kishuin v'adalim b'shei paksu. Kishuin, squash and pumpkin, different kinds of gourds. So it says b'shei paksu. Rashi says it means when a certain part of it falls off or it was taken off. That's called the gemar malacha. B'shelo piksu b'sheyamar arema. If it's not that stage, so then if you made a pile of it, arema is a pile. If you made a heap of these kishun and talun, that's called the gemar malacha. I think what's going to say right away, and Shabbos that's not considered a malacha. Same thing as by onions. What's considered a gemar malacha that's chayv and meiser? When you made a heap, you took the onions and you heaped them together. You had already the farmer came and he already separated them from the ground. He dug them up from the ground, but now it's not considered gemar malacha until he piles it up. So piling it up is considered a malacha by Shabbos. There's no such malacha as a mother sarema. That there's no shachas. These two subjects don't have to do with each other. That it's only something which is considered a professional kind of an accomplishment. And if it's not chayiv on Shabbos. So peeling barley is not considered a kind of a malacha. That's not dash, and even if you did a lot, that's not considered malacha. We just finished that Gemara. What happened? We spoke about 2 points. One was about peeling barley, and it says by Meiser, if you do a handful, it is considered a Gemara Malacha. But by Shabbos, the Gemara says it's mutter, and Allah Lamaisa, it says that Rav's wife and Rapi's wife, they used to peel for them barley, and they would eat even cupful. So that's mutter.
And they wouldn't have to take mice.
So that's a problem now. Chaim Dov's asking a nice kasha that what happened on Shabbos? That if they did it on Shabbos, the Gemara is finished saying that it is Chayiv Ma'aser if you have a handful. So that's a nice kasha. What happened over here? So somebody suggested to me that the case would be in Rav's that they took off Ma'aser before Shabbos already. They took off these cases of Rav's wife and Rapi's wife. They're taking it off already in the stalk stage, whatever. You don't have to, but they did, and therefore they'd be allowed to eat it on Shabbos. I think that might be a nice answer to the question. But as far as Hilchos Shabbos goes, it's mutter to peel the barley and eat it. Nowadays, we don't eat it so much. We don't have the application so much, but that's the best.
Is it a mutter act?
Right, that's Agamar. So Agamar says it's a mutter act. And then the Agamar talks about something which is also on Shabbos, and that talks about separating the bora. The second thing was a bora case, the case of the Malilos, and the case with the psolas. And you blow a lot at a time. If you did a little bit and ate it, so they eat it, then it's mutter. That's not considered bora. That's still derech achila. But if you do a lot, then it's considered bora, and it'll be chayiv on Shabbos maybe.
Rebbe, at the end of the third line from the bottom, Rashi has an amazing simple taich of Meleches Maksheves. He says Meleches Maksheves, shehi Meleches Umnes.
Yes, a professional craftsmanship. Okay. We're up to the Gemara case at Molel. So Rashi and Taisus both refers to the Gemara Dafagod that says that you're not allowed to be Molel on Shabbos if you have the stalks that are detached from the ground. So on Shabbos you wouldn't be allowed to separate the kernels from the stalk. But on Yontif it says you may. That was the whole Gemara came in that you Molel and Believers be Yontif. But here the Gemara takes it for the Pasha that you have to have some kind of a shinoi. You have to do some shinoi. So that's the most question case at Molel. So usually the way you do it is you hold it between your hands. You take the stalk. Hold it between your hands and you rub back and forth, and all the kernels fall down. That's the regular way. But here it says you have to do some kind of a shinoi. What kind of shinoi? Abaya mishmei the Rav Yosef Amar chada chada. You only do one finger against the finger. You only take with two fingers, your thumb against your forefinger. Those are the two fingers to rub it. You can't use the hand against the hand, a finger against the finger. Rav mishmei the Rav Yosef Amar, a different version of Rav Yosef, chada tarti. One finger against two fingers. The thumb against two fingers. You're allowed to rub it. Also a shinoi, one against two. And since you're doing a shinoi, the regular way is to do a hand against the hand. The regular way is hand against the hand. So you're even allowed to do one finger on one hand. You can do one finger against all the other four fingers. That's also enough of a shinoi. You don't have to do one against one against two. You can do one against four also. As long as you don't do the regular way, which is a hand against the hand. So what do we say this now? That by Shabbos you're not allowed to be molel at all. And on Yantif you are allowed to, but you have to do a shinoi. What kind of a shinoi? As long as you do it with one hand, that's a shinoi. The Mishnah, the Gemara continues further. The case of Benapeach. So we spoke about Benapeach means after things are already, the kernels are off, either before Shabbos or on Yontif if you did a shinoi. There's also issue of being Benapeach, and the Brisa before said that on Shabbos you have to, on Yontif you're allowed to do even Knon v'Tamcha. You could use these selecting vessels, which we're going to come up soon, that you're allowed to be bora on Yontif, but on Shabbos you're not allowed to. So you have to do, before it said that you do b'yad, you do from hand to hand. That's the way that you're going to pour these malilos from one hand to the other hand, and then the wind, whatever it's gonna, the solos will fall away.
A little bit like that. They take one of those egg cutters. They got lots of little metal strings, and you put an egg there, you push it down, and you got 15 pieces of sliced, nicely sliced hard-boiled eggs. Is that a problem?
I don't think so, but I don't know.
This is a kind of a professional.
No, professional has to be something. No, just cutting. Here, professional means that it's professional something umnis, which is something which is considered a malacha. Slicing is not considered a malacha.
That's because it's not gas. It's not.
It's not tochen. It's not something we have tochen and dash. We have the 39 malachas.
Unlike the what do you call it? The shum crusher. That's problematic. Right?
That'll be more of a tochen. More of a crusher. Okay, the Gemara considers case of Benapeach. We're talking about on Shabbos, and not if you're allowed to be even Knon v'Tamcha. The Gemara said before, you're allowed to use these selecting tools. We'll see soon more about it. But here it says on Shabbos, the Brisa said a page ago. The Gemara said the Brisa, the Gemara, everything said a page ago that you're allowed to be Menapeach if you're Molo Me'erev Shabbos. So you're allowed to be Menapeach miyad liyad. From hand to hand.
I forgot the word manufacture.
The word's like blowing, but it doesn't mean blowing by mouth. Maybe sometimes it means also blowing when you just pour something from one hand to the other hand, and things are going to fall out. The souls will fall out. That's also mutter. Amar Avada Baravu, Amar Rabban Apeach, Mi Kishrei as also on the top of Daf Yudalid, that you only can use from your fingers. Don't use your whole hand, only from your fingers. Either means blowing and hold it on your fingertips, on your fingers, not on your palm of your hand, or it means that you're pouring from one hand to the other hand. Also, don't use your whole palm, just use the fingers of your hand. But they laughed at this in Eretz Yisrael. Since you're doing a shinoi, it's not doing it the regular way of separating the psolas. So it's a shinoi, and you're allowed to use the whole hand. You don't have to use only the fingers. You're allowed to use the whole palm of the hand. You could use your whole one hand, and it means one. Rashi said before, biyad liyad. Rashi said it means to pour from one hand to the other hand. So either it means biyad achas also means that you can use your whole hand, the whole kocho, and you don't have to make any other kind of a shinui. Or some say that maybe biyad achas. How do they say? Biyad liyad. I forgot. Rashi seems to say that there was another pshat here, but Rashi seems to say that biyad liyad. The Gemara said before, you pour from hand to hand, and here it says b'kula yada. You have to say that it means you could use the whole hand in contrast to your fingers. You could pour from hand to hand without only using your fingers.
That was in Eretz Yisrael. They did it.
Yes, and that's how we pass that you don't have to have a shinui in the menapeach as
So
long
we are
as.
talking about Yom Tov, right?
No, this is by Shabbos because by Yom Tov, we just switched. What you pointed out again is a nice thing because Tosfos and Rashi point out that when it says Ketzad Mola, it's talking about on Yom Tov because on Shabbos you're not allowed to be Mola. And when it says Ketzad Menapech, it's talking about Shabbos because on Yom Tov there's no problem to be Menapech. So here we're talking about Shabbos. Ketzad Menapech is talking about Shabbos. So the Pesugya, the whole Mishnah, the Mishnah came in about Molich and Chala to the Kohen, but the way the Gemara came in is Mola and Malilos, and because of Mola and Malilos, we went also into the Sugya about to be Makalev, and also how to be Borer. So we had in that issue both about Dash, two kinds of a Dash, and by Malilos we say you're not allowed to on Shabbos, and Yom Tov you are allowed to. And as far as Kiluf, Mechalfim, we said that it's mutter on Yom Tov to be Mechalf the Soren, even on Shabbos, and there's no restriction of having a certain amount. And the other Gemara spoke about Menapeyach. How are you Menapeyach? So on Shabbos you have to have the Shinui, and on Yom Tov you don't have to have a Shinui for being Menapeyach. The practical, the halachas are all true, but we don't do these things so much, so it doesn't come into actual practice so much because we don't do all these things even on the weekday. The next Gemara.
And what's the physicality of Mafayach? What are you doing?
So Rashi, you have the kernels that are mixed with the psolas. After you rub them off the stalks, a part of the stalk also came off, and now you have everything mixed up, and you want to separate it. So there's some kind of a blowing act, but it doesn't seem that it's blowing with your mouth. It's blowing from hand to hand. That you toss it from one hand to hand, then the psolas is going to fall off.
Like in Klal Gadol, you're making a winnowing.
Winnowing. So this is like winnowing is on a big farnem that you're doing with the. But this is only a little bit Malilos that he has. He does it by hand.
Personal portion.
So on Yom Tov, you're allowed to do it without any restriction. We'll see even soon you're allowed to use kalim. Also, the Gemara said kanon v'tamcho, as long as you don't use kalim that are used for a very big quantity. And on Shabbos, you have to use the shino of doing one hand, from one hand to one hand. And Yom Tov is, they do a little bit everywhere. Yeah, you have to have some kind of a shino. Next Mishnah. The next Mishnah talks about now the kind of a tchina, tochen. There's another malacha. So we see all these kinds of malachas zochel nefesh, that even though everything's zochel nefesh, it doesn't mean that blanket state and everything's mutter. Each malacha, the Mishnah talks about what's mutter, what's aser. We spoke about carrying also before. That was not for zochel nefesh. Then we spoke about that was mitoch. Then we had about this disha, kinds of disha, and borer, which is coming up again later. And now this Mishnah is talking about tochen. One of the malachas is to grind. So including in grinding, which usually is used for flour, and you're not allowed to grind wheat to make flour. That's usher. You're not allowed to do that on Yom Tov. You could take the flour and knead it.
Done it before Yom Tov.
Okay. But here it talks about other kinds of grinding. It is going to be grinding spices and salt. So spices, again, we get spices that are already pre-ground already. So we don't do this in our houses. But they used to grind spices and also salt. They got coarse salt and they wanted to grind it to make it finer. So they would use a pounder. They would use a mortar and a pestle. So I allowed to do that on Yom Tov. So a madoch means a pistol, the hammer that you go into the mortar. That's the pounding tool. So the regular way is to use a stone. Madoch shaleven is the standard way. Madoch shaleitz is a little bit of a shino. If made out of wood, it's not the regular way. And even more than that, the bigger shino is to use some kind of a ladle, it's up some kind of a ladle to bang it with. And pach is going to be the bowl. Usually use a mortar that's specially made in order to be able to pound into it with a pistol. But a pach would be some kind of a jug that you're going to be pounding into the jug instead of the mortar. So that's a shinoi. So what does it say over here? Beishamai says that you have to have a big shinoi for. Everybody says that salt has to have a bigger shinoi than for tavlin. That's going to be the Gemara's going to discuss that whatever you have to do for spices, you need a bigger shinoi for salt, and we'll see why. But Beishamai says that you need a small shinoi for spices, tavlinin, and a big shinoi for salt. How does he say? Beishamai says tavlin can be pounded with a wooden pistol, and that's a little shinoi because usually you'd like to use a stone. So you can't use a stone; you have to use a wooden. And melach has that even a big. No, there's a maducha and a meducha. The maducha is the pounder. The meducha is going to be the receptacle. Well, yeah. So usually you'd like to use a stone pounder, but you have to use a wooden one. It has to be a shinoi. And melach has to have even a bigger shinoi. It has to be a pach, which is like a wooden ladle that you doesn't. I'm sorry. The pach is the bowl, a jug that you use instead of the regular mortar. You use a pach, and it's a pro is like a ladle that you bang it. That'll be instead of the hammer, the pounder. So that's a big shinoi. That's not a normal way of pounding something. So Beishamai says that for tavlin you need a small shinoi, and for salt you need a big shinoi. Beisil also agrees that you have to have a bigger shinoi for salt than for tavlin. But he says for tavlin you don't need a shinoi at all. You're allowed to use a regular way of a stone pistol, and the salt has to have a small shinoi. So everyone agrees that salt is more chomer than tavlina. Beishamai says everything needs a shinoi, but melach needs even a big shinoi. And Beisil says tavlin does not need a shinoi at all, and melach, salt, is enough to have a small shinoi. So the general subject we're talking about is tchina, tochen, under the title of the 39 malachas is called tochen, grinding, and we're grinding here spices and salt, and that's the machlokas, how much of a shinoi do you have to have. The first thing that one wants to explain is why should salt be different than any other kind of spice that you're allowed to grind? But if you're allowed to do by spices, do by salt also. Why is it more chomer? The kol yam amiyas melach boy shinoi. Everybody holds you have to have a shinoi by salt and call it a bigger shinoi than tavlin. My time. Why is it worse than regular spices? Rav Chisda have machlokes what the reason is. Chadam makol hakder is kol and srichas melach. Ben kol hakder is srichas tavlin. Every dish has salt. You always put salt into every dish. So you know before you're going to need salt. You're not going to be surprised. Oh, I didn't know I'm going to need salt. Of course you needed salt. So you should have prepared it before you entered. You should have pounded it before. But spices, sometimes you use this spice, sometimes you use that spice. You don't know which spice you're going to use. So therefore, it's not expected that you should prepare all the spices. You don't know which one you're going to need. On Yantik, you decide what you want to use. That's why they were machmir more salt. Yes. And the other that other spices, if you're going to pound it a day earlier, so it's not going to have the same taste. It's going to expire a little bit. What's a better word than that? It's going to get a little pug. The word pug they use expire nowadays, but it means it's going to lose some of its taste. It's not going to be as strong. But salt doesn't lose its taste. So there's no reason. So here it's not here. This one doesn't say it talks about how much you expected it, but is there any loss in preparing it before? Salt, there was no loss. So you should have taken into consideration I might need it. So do it. But by other spices, even if you knew you're going to need it, but I don't want to do it the day before because it's not going to be a strong taste. My benai, what would be the difference between these two mandiamim? The other man if he knew which spices he's going to use. So according to the mandam, that has to do that you didn't expect it. I did know. I'd expect it. I know I'm going to use this kind of spice tomorrow, so I should have prepared it before. But it is going to get pug. So maybe the other mandam would say that you don't have to prepare it because better that it should be fresh. Another opposite nafkamina would be saffron. They can translate murika as kalfam, which is saffron. Saffron is also a spice that you don't always need. You don't always need it, but it doesn't get pug. It doesn't lose its taste. So therefore, there's no reason that you shouldn't have prepared it before. You can say that I didn't expect it. So this is the machlokas between the two reasons. One reason says the criteria is if you know that you're going to need it or not, and the other mandiyamar is the criterion is if it's going to be able to stay just as fresh.
Rebbe, does this relate to the famous gra on Leil Pesach, where making the harif you wait? Yeah.
I think it says that the question over there was that if you prepare it earlier and it loses its taste, so it's not more anymore. It doesn't have tamoror. I think that was the issue over there. Okay, the Gemara continues. Shmuel is a huge chiddush. He says that you're allowed to grind salt the regular way. That's against the Mishnah, because the Mishnah, even still was makel, he says salt has to have some kind of a shinoi, and we just discussed it why. And now and Shmuel now says that no, you're allowed to use everything, do everything regular, even salt. He's against the Mishnah. The Mishnah says you do need salt. Shinoi, even though Beisil says that Tavla does not have to have a shinoi, but salt he agrees does have to. So how could Shmuel go against the Mishnah? The answer is Tana. He also the following brisa means there's a brisa against our Mishnah. The Tanya Amrav Meir, he said, Meir says a different version of the Mishnah. He's going to say Machlokas B'Sham Beisil a little different than our Mishnah. First of all, he says B'Sham agrees that if you're doing other spices he first of all he says other spices don't need a shinui at all. That's against our Mishnah according to Beis Shammai, because in our Mishnah Beis Shammai says also you need a small shinui for other spices. But that he argues is no, according to Beis Shammai, regular spices don't need a shinui at all. And another chiddush that if you did salt together, you do it all together. The spices and the salt, you need all these things. So you made an all spice kind of thing, and you're allowed to grind it all together. You're allowed to grind it the regular way, even salt together with the spices. What is the machlokes? If you're using salt by itself. Machlokes is if you can use salt by itself. Then you have to use a big shinui, like it says in our Mishnah, that for salt alone, you have to have a big shinui. And also it says another point, which we didn't have in our Mishnah so far, that sli, I will load it today. Only a little bit salt. You're not allowed to do a lot of salt, only a little bit. We said when you make roast, you don't put a lot of salt on it when you roast it, but when you're kashering it for putting it into a pot, you have to have a lot of salt. That's what we call kashering. So you kasher it. So then you have to have a lot of salt. So even according to Beis Shammai, you wouldn't be allowed to do a lot, only a little bit. So what do we see so far? That Rav Meir says, according to Beis Shammai, you could do tavlin the regular way without any shinui, and if you're doing salt together, you could even do that also, throw that in also, and also without any shinui. If you're doing salt by itself, then you have to have a big shinui and only a little bit. Beisil lomin b'chol davar. Beisil says anything. So anything, we're going to see soon that we're going to say that this brisa holds that anything means that you don't need a shinui at all. But the Gemara takes the word b'chol davar would mean you're allowed to use anything, which means even a muksa, that you're allowed to take a stone and pound the salt. That's not true because it's muksa. Can you take that literally, that it means you're allowed to pound with anything which is muksa? No, it doesn't mean that. They say that it means that even a lot. In contrast to what Beis Shammai said, only the sli of alolik dera, that you only can do a little bit salt. It still says you can do as much as you want. But as far as we're concerned, we're not interested in this point so much. We want to know you need a shinui. Shmuel says Shmuel pounded the salt without a shinui, and he says, what does he hold like? He holds like a mayor according to Beis Hillel. So even though the Gemara doesn't stress it, but the Rashi points out that if Beis Shammai and the Reisha said that when you're allowed to do regular salt together with the spices, you don't need a shinui. So when Beis Hillel says that you can do it by itself, it goes without saying that you don't need a shinui. So a few machloksim came out, and Shmuel holds like the brisa of Rav Meir, that according to Beis Hillel, you could use as much salt, you could do as much salt as you want, even without a shinui. And that's how he paskin.
Rebbe, according to Shammai Shita, is it based on the idea that it's Eino Nicker, or is it based on the idea of Bittul? Because again, you're doing the same act to the salt, but because it's in a Ta'arov, it's in something else, you're allowing it. So what's the lump?
We had the idea before also. We had there was a Rabbi Yehuda or somebody that said, what is that? I'm trying to remember. There was a tafel that I don't remember the Gemara right now. If anybody could help me, we had a Gemara that even though something is also b'shama Beis Hillel, but if you're doing one, you're allowed to do the other one also. Tafel. Oh, we just had it. 1 second. Yes, that was on Yud Beis and Yud Beis where it spoke about the matanos. You're allowed to take the matanos. So he says if you're taking truma, if you're taking chag, you're allowed to take truma also. That's a Yud Beis and Yud Beis. So it doesn't seem that it has to do with bittul or anything. It just means that all these isurim seem to be drabanan. So if you're doing something which is permissible, so then throw that in also. And as a tafel, you're also allowed to do that. It seems everything here is rabbanans. It seems.
Is it Eino Nicker then? Is it because it's Eino Nicker?
I don't know. I'll say I don't know. Nice observation. What is the Agdar over here exactly? I don't know. But what do we have in our Gemara? That according to our Mishnah, Shmuel says, again to our Mishnah, I'm sorry, according to our Mishnah, they still says that when you pound salt, you do have to have a shinui, at least a small shinui. Instead of using a stone pistol, use a wooden one. And Shmuel paskins like the brisa against our Mishnah and says that salt does not need a shinui at all. The Gemara continues, Amalei, first top line on the screen, Amalei Ravacha Badal Olabrei, Ravacha Badal told his son, Kidaiches Atzli Atzluye, the doch. When you're going to pound, so tilt it a little bit. The word Atzli Atzluye means to tilt it and pound. So Rashi explains he's going according to Shmuel. He also holds like Shmuel, that you're allowed to use a stone pistol for pounding the salt, for grinding the salt. But he says a little shina you do need, even though using the regular pistol, more a stone, not like the Mishnah says you have to use wood, but do use a small shina and do it on an angle, not the regular way you pound it straight down. You do it on an angle, tilt it a little bit. Rav Sheshes Shalom Kol Buchna. Rav Sheshes heard on Yantif that somebody was pounding with a pistol. And he said, "I'm gonna hide lobby gabay the saw you. This is surely not in my house. Like my house, they don't do that, and because they keep yantif." And he heard somebody that was pounding. But it seems from the story we're going to see soon that it was a stone pistol that was pounding salt, which is against the Mishnah. The Mishnah says you have to only have wood, and that wouldn't be a problem because it passed like Shmuel. It seems that you're allowed to use stone as long as you tilt it. But he heard, like the Gemara is going to say right away, that he heard that they were pounding it the regular way. And he said, in my house, I told them they shouldn't do such a thing. So this is surely not in my house. The next door neighbor's doing it. It wasn't in my house. Omar, by the way, Rav Sheshes was blind. So it could be that he was very sensitive. He was very sensitive to the sounds. So the Gemara says, maybe this pounding was also with a tilt. You say that Shmuel is good, and as long as you tilt it a little bit, it's good, even if it's a stone pistol. So what's the problem? Maybe it was in his house. No, the Shammai David Solo Kole. He was able to tell from the pitch of the town that it was not with the Shinoi. It was the regular way of pounding. He was able to be sensitive to that. And he said, no, they're pounding the regular way. In my house, they don't do that. They tilt it a little bit. Maybe it was spices. Spices, you don't need a Shinoi, only by salt. How did you know that it was salt? So I don't know how to translate it, but it means that it's a different sound. He was able to tell if it was salt that was being pounded or it was tavlin. From the sound, he was able to tell that it was a stone pistol that was being done on salt and it wasn't even tilted. And he said, that's not in my house. In my house, we do like the Gemara that said you have to have a shina. So as far as the halacha goes, some parts like Shmuel that you're allowed to, like the Gemara said, that you're allowed to use even a stone pistol, just tilt it a little bit. Just tilt it a little bit, like the Gemara said you're supposed to do. And some are machmir more, some say Dominic is to be machmir more than that. But my said these things don't come up by us because we get everything pre-ground, we have everything, the spices, the salt. We don't, if you want coarse salt, you're not going to, even if you get coarse salt, you're not going to pound it into fine salt. You take what you have. But in those days, they used to do it at home. So that's why it always
that's a nice little gadget. They sell you mixed herbs and it's salt also. And a little grinder, you turn it, and you have enough just for your whatever it's going to be.
So the question is, if you're allowed to do that, do you need a shino? Do you need a shino? Do you need a shino or not? Yeah, Amish says by Tavlin, if you don't need a shino, very nice. Okay, comes up. Maybe Chaim Dad is saying
they have
the salt
some
also.
of them have
Even salt also. Okay, very nice. So it's something to find out. Halacha now. Okay.
I'm wondering about a peppercorn on Yom Tov. Peppercorns grinders have knives in them. You turn the top, and it professionally grinds peppercorns into pepper. I would think that's usher on Yom Tov. Is that correct?
Why would you think so? The Mishnah says Tavlinim you're allowed to do kedarkam.
Malakto, it's like a cliche. Malakto.
We're not talking about Shabbos. We're talking about Yantif over here. Shabbos you're not allowed to do it. We're talking about Yantif. And our Mishnah says that you're allowed to be dach Tavlinim kedarkam. So I'm not saying Maisa, but it sounds so far that you're allowed to.
According to one opinion, if it's salt, who says that?
Even Bishama is machmer. He said according to Meir that even then you're allowed to do the salt also. So maybe in Chaim David's case, maybe if you have salt also. So I'm not saying that's mutter of Emmanuel, but just reading the Mishnah here that it says that's spices, not salt, spices. And the Gemara talks about why do they do it on the spot? Because it's fresher. That's obviously, I think that's the reason why they're selling it like that. So that's what the Gemara says. It's fresher today than yesterday. And if you didn't know you're going to need it, sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't need it. Maybe they'll be machmir on that. That you could have, if you knew you need it, if you knew you're going to need it, maybe we'll be machmir.
So any manual spice grinder that's based on this principle of knives that you turn and it grinds, according to that, would be mutter on Yom Tov because of pag tama.
Yes, but also maybe we're machmir that if you knew you needed this, maybe we're going to be machmir. So I'm not pasking. I'm just reading the Gemara and nice questions that come up because I thought all these Gemaras don't happen nowadays. But it is nice to see that we still do grind some things. So maybe it will be relevant to find out.
They also use ceramic cutters. they have some kind of hard.
Okay, same
ceramic.
idea, same idea,
And in other
same
words,
idea.
it doesn't have to be metal.
Okay, so I don't know again if the application of our Mishnah goes to these things. I'm not saying halacha, but it is nice to find out. Tana Rabbanan. It would be nice if it's mutter and you find out from the Rav that it's mutter, so you buy this thing special for Yontif and you bring it to the table and it's a big conversation piece that you start grinding. What are you doing? Okay, so but don't do it till you get the authorized psak from the Rav of Yerushalayim that it's mutter. Tana Rabbanan.
Waiting Citron to get a psak for us.
Tana Rabbanan. Ain't no sintisni. They ain't kosher l'machtashes. Now it's talking about grinding grain to make it finer. So you have wheat, and there's a chilka, targis, tisni. They used to chop grain that you could have different coarseness, fineness, chopped in halves or thirds or quarters and fifths. The Gemara says all kinds of things. Here it says you're not allowed to do it. Tisni is Rashi says is divided into four. When you chop it so fine that each grain is divided into four. So he says you're not allowed to do that on Yantif because that's so we're talking about again grinding. This is a kind of a grind. Now we spoke about spices and salt. Now we're talking about grain. Are you allowed to chop grain? So it first says you're not allowed to do tisni. Then it says you're not allowed to grind in a mortar. This is a kind of a mortar that's not used for spices. It's used for grain. So it says you're not allowed to do it. The Gemara Kasha Tarti. You said two statements that are contradictory. So Rashi explains because tisni is pretty fine. First it says don't do tisni. Then it says don't use this mortar and pestle altogether. Maybe I should change the words. Mortar and pestle is more maybe for spices and the like. But here we're talking about some kind of a pounder. I don't know the word, but maybe it is also called a mortar and a pestle. But this is something which is designated usually for grain. So if you say that you're not allowed to use it for grain, then it means anything, even if it's not going to be so fine. There's such a thing called chilka, targis, that has just been chopped into halves or chopped into thirds. Tisni is chopped into quarters. So the contradictory statements. First it says don't make tisni, which sounds only when it's finely ground. And then it says don't use machteshes at all. That sounds like you're not allowed to use it even to chop it coarsely. The Gemara explains that it's one thing. It means to say, why should you not use tisni? Because you can't use the machteshes at all, which the Chora doesn't answer the question that we say there's two contradictory things. So I don't know how to explain this Gemara at this point, but he says you can't use the machteshes at all. And it seems it's not only for finely ground, even for coarsely ground. Don't use the machteshes. If so let's say don't use the machteshes, and I'll know that you won't be able to get tisni because the only way to get tisni is by using this kind of kli. If you can't use the kli at all, so you're not going to get any finely ground grain. The Gemara says, "Itani in a kosher machteshes have a main anami the machteshes gedola. Above machteshes katana in l'shabedami." If it was just a statement that you can't use a machteshes, this kind of a pounder, then I would have thought only a big one, which is the derech. When you use the grind grain, you have a big one. It's easier to chop well, but if you're going to use a small one, which is a kind of a shino, it's not usually the way to use for grain. Maybe only for spices, use a small one. So then I would think that you're allowed to. So it told me you're not allowed to have tisni. By saying that you're not allowed to have tisni means that the product, you never can get a product. Why can you get a product? If I would be allowed to use a small pounder system, mortar and pestle, I can get tisni also. I can't use it the regular way, but I can make a shinoi. Since it says that you're not allowed to have tisni in any way, that means that you can't use even a small system. You can't even use a small set of mortar and pestle. On this, the Brisa says you may use a small one. But Tanya ain't kosher machteshes gedol, but kosher machteshes katana. The Brisa says openly that you may use a small one. You just may not use a big one. And Yop Shach, you just said a second ago that you're not allowed to use a small one. This Brisa says you may use a small one. Rabbi, bottom line, Tanya nam limasnisa machteshes gedol. Tanya, I take it back, and you're only not allowed to use a big one. You may use a small one. So the problem is that the Gemara left us hanging because the Gemara Kasha said the teretz, knocked off the teretz, and we're hanging. The Gemara had a kasha. Why does it say two things? It says you can't make tisni, and it says that ain't kosher machteshes, and we have no teretz. Why does it say both of them? It does say you can't use the machteshes. So Rashi says the teretz, which I don't understand because the Gemara doesn't say it, and Rashi's saying it on his own. Like what happened to Gemara? The Gemara leaves out the answer. Rashi says the answer is that you can't make tisni at all. You can't use machteshes gedola, and you can't use tisni at all. That means you could use machteshes katana for something else. Let's say again, just put it into. Let's say you want to make coarsely ground grain. You can't use a machteshes gedola. You could use a machteshes katana. But tisni, which is very finely ground, and it's a big tercha to do it, so that they answer it even if machteshes katana. Using machteshes gedola, that they answer it because it's too much like weekday work. I don't mean to say Udu the Chol, I mean to say that it's more like an Avoda, the Sada, things that people do on a big farnim,
Right.
and it's the other many days, that's Malacha. So all these Malachas of Bachal Nefesh, it's only a matter if it's in the kitchen kind of thing, not something you do on a big scale, factory scale. But that's why Kinder's Mateshes Gedola, Mateshes Ketana you could use, but Tisni, to make it finely ground, is a big tircha, and therefore they asked it even if you can use the Mateshes Ketana. So that's a nice answer, but I don't see it in the Gemara. Rashi says it, and I'm just wondering how he saw it in the Gemara. That was Abaya's tevis. We turn the page. Rav Amar lo kasha. Hold on, v'alahu. We have a kasha. The contradiction was: are you allowed to use a machteshes katana? Are you allowed to use a small mortar? So we had the contradiction. Abaya says that you are allowed to. We only answered a big one, not a small one. Just you can't make Disney. It's a small point. But another point. But you're allowed to use a small machteshes. And Rabbi says a different teretz. It depends who. This is for us. This is for them. Us and them means Babel and Eretz Yisrael. Us, Rabbi wasn't Babel. He said for us it's permissible to use a machteshes Kitana, and for them in Eretz Yisrael it's Asa. The Gemara doesn't explain why. What's the difference between Babel and Eretz Yisrael? What's the difference? So Rashi gets from a couple of lines later, the Gemara is going to say soon that Rashi's a speculation on Rashi's part, but he says the Gemara is going to say a pshat why it might be Asa, because there were some places where they had Avadim, Kananim, that were Mizal in the halachos, and if you matter them a little bit, they're going to be matter too much, and therefore they didn't permit it, even the Machteshes Kitana, because they're going to use the Machteshes Gedola and say, when they bring it to the table, the master will say, well, how do you do this? He said I had a small Machtesh. He really used the big Machteshes because he didn't want to bother so much with this one. That's the Shinu, it's not the regular way to do it. So Rashi says that in Eretz Yisrael they had these Avadim that were Mizalzel, and in the Bible they didn't have those Avadim, so that's why they will make them in their Bible and not in Eretz Yisrael. Yeah, because they're Mizalzel, so they have to be Machmir. There are other Pshatim in the Gemara also. The Gemara doesn't say this openly. The Gemara is just going to say a story soon. Here it just says for us and for them. The Rambam loves the opposite Pshat, that in Eretz Yisrael that wheat was on a higher grade level. So then it was, I forgot how it goes, that I forgot what the point was over there, but something to do with the quality of the wheat, not the fact if they were Avadim or not. There are a few Pshatim in the Gemara over here, but that's Rashi's Pshat. That in Eretz Yisrael they had Avadim now Mazalza, so we machmir even not use a Machteshes Ketana. The Gemara says a story of Papi Ikla Leber Shmuel. Papi was visiting the house of Mar Shmuel. I don't think this is the regular Shmuel because Papi was many generations later after Mar Shmuel, after the regular Shmuel. So I don't know either it's not the regular Papi, it's not the regular Mar Shmuel. But anyway, he visited him. I see an Yantif. I see like daisa below achal. They've served him daisa, which is ground grain, and he didn't eat it because he's choshes that they did it on Yantif. The Gemara is going to say right away why he thought so, that they made it on Yantif and you're not allowed to pound it. The Gemara says, why? The Dilma of Machteshes Ketana of Dua. Maybe they used the small Machteshes, which was said you're allowed to use. The Machteshes Gedol you're not allowed to use, but the Machteshes Ketana you are allowed to use. So why didn't he eat it? And maybe they did it in a mutter way. The answer is the Chazi Devadaik Tvei. So he saw that it was very pounded well, it was ground well, that he couldn't have done it in Machteshes Ketana. If they pounded it so well, it had to have been done in Machteshes Gedol, and you're not allowed to do it on Yantif. So they did it for Issa. The Dilma Mesmal of Dua, maybe it was made prepared yesterday. No, he saw that it was fresh. The Chazi Devakol of Tsiare. He saw that it was, from the way of the color, he was able to tell that it was freshly ground, and a Machteshes Gedola, so it's awesome. The truth is, I don't know. Does Rashi say, Kol Tzarei, Sohar Mariso Ayakol V'Lavan? The shine of its appearance was kaluf, which would mean peel, which Rashi translates as white. It means you can tell from the, I don't know why the word kaluf is the way to say Lavan. It means from the color, he was able to tell that it was freshly ground. So according to the first version of the Gemara, the reason why he didn't eat it is because he saw that it was freshly ground today, on Yantif, with the Machteshes Ketana, which is Asa. Another possibility, I could say, in the house of Mar Shmuel, there was a priestess of the Avadim of the Avadim Canaanim, that they would be Mizalzel, and therefore he didn't want to eat it because it could be that they used the Machteshes Gedola, even though it was possible to use the Machteshes Ketana, but it was Choshe they can use the Machteshes Gedola and say that they use the small one. This is where Rashi got from the whole shot about the Avadim. The Gemara doesn't say openly, and it doesn't say this was in Eretz Yisrael either. This probably was in Babel also. Papi, Be'emar Shmuel probably was in Babel. But Rashi got the idea that you have to answer sometimes the Machteshes Ketana because people that are Mazalzel and these are Machteshes Gedola. So Rashi says it's pshat, but as we said, there are other pshatim also. As far as the Gemara, what did we have so far? We learned about all this Mishnah. All this Mishnah was talking about dach, how to pound things, and the Mishnah spoke about tavlinim and salt. And it says that the Quanta Basil Tavlin does not need any shinui. salt does need a small shinui. The Gemara brought Shmuel, the person like a mayor that says salt does not have any shinui at all. But at the end, the Gemara says, but something, yes, you can use a stone pistol, but it has to be on a tilt a little bit in order to make some kind of a shinui. After that,
Even the Mechilim.
even the Mikkel, right? And then the Shulchan Aruch, there's different opinions if we do like that, Kula, maybe we'll machmir. Then it spoke about pounding grain, and here the Gemara says that you can't make kisni at all. Finely ground, you can't do all too much tircha. If it's not so finely ground, so this is at least a bias shot that with tisni you can't do it all. And as far as pounding grain, not so finely, so there's difference between the machteshes gadol and machteshes katana. Machteshes gadol is asa. Use a big machteshes, which is the usual way of doing it. Don't use that. Machteshes katana should be mutter. Rabbi says in some places don't use even the machteshes katana. Rashi says if there's a chash that they'll use a big one, and say we use the small one, you can't trust them, so we mark them over there also. That was
Rabbi, common, is
Yes.
it common that we make an isser based on a suffix just because it's shihi?
It doesn't mean a suffix. It means that over there are problems. Like the Gemara talks about Einan b'nei Torah. It says in a place where they're not b'nei Torah, you have to be machmir. And the Gemara has a couple of cases where they weren't b'nei Torah. Just to point out that what happened recently, not about somebody that dies on Yontif, and it talks about on second day Yontif. The story here was on the first day Yontif, but on second day Yontif says that even Jews are allowed to be Mechal Yontif in order to take care of the mace. We didn't learn it, but this brings down. There's another Gemara that says there's a case of Ein B'nei Torah and they were machmir, and they said don't do it because they can learn how to be mezalzel in Yontif Sheni. So the Gemara says that in a place where that, and they talk about in Manenu, are we called B'nei Torah or not? Taisva says there was a story that they did it with the Jews on Yontif Sheni, and Taisva says, are we B'nei Torah? Like the Gemara says in Shabbos, that if you're not B'nei Torah, don't do it. So there was such a thing as Ein B'nei Torah, you have to be machmir. So here, it wasn't a question of Ein B'nei Torah, it was about avodim, mezalzelim. So you do find such a thing. And the post can talk about each case sometimes. What are we? What's our status? Are we Ein B'nei Torah? Are we considered Amaratzim? Are we avodim or mezalzelim? We have this situation like that. So it's spoken about. The next Mishnah talks about Borah, which we had a little bit spoken about. This is for us. This is for them. Zeh lanu v'zeh lahem.
Meaning this year
And for Bavel and for Eretz Yisrael, he was in Bavel. So when he says Rava was in Bavel, so when he said Halan, he meant for Bavel, and the who was in Eretz Yisrael.
Excuse me, Rebbe.
Please.
The last thing about he was just worried about when it says Da'avdi that he wasn't worried about Rav Papi himself, was he?
Rav Papi was the one who was the Machmir, because in the house of Mar Shmuel, again, Rav Papi was the guest in the house of Mar Shmuel.
Rav Papi was the guest, and he thought that
He was a Machmir, and he said that in the house of Mar Shmuel, they have these avodim that I don't trust. And
I
even
see.
Even if they say they did it in the small ones, I'm kosher they did it in the big ones. You could
Yeah.
say, okay, I guess this concept of Avdim Mezalzeli, and nowadays it might be that concept doesn't apply to Avodim. If you have people that are not observant, you have to be choshesh, even if they say that they'll do it the right way. You have to know how observant they are. They might be Mezalzel and do it and say they did it in the correct way. Really, they didn't. The application again with the Machteshes we don't have nowadays because we get all our things grounded before. But concept we're learning and
We have those little hand grinders.
Okay.
Yeah, but the word pritzusa is like someone who's going to breach the laws, right?
right, correct.
So why are you using the word mezalzel?
Rashi's translating. Rashi's the word mezalzel, right? I got that from Rashi.
I didn't see that.
Maybe I got it wrong. Here's the Rashi. Rashi, third line, the mezalzeli.
Second line also. Third line.
Oh. Thank you.
Hey, it could be much more simple because people lie because they're embarrassed or they don't want to say they did wrong.
I'm not following.
Today, you could have a situation where a person is even religious or not religious, and you can't really trust what they say because the reason they're going to say they did something is because they're embarrassed or they don't want to admit they did something wrong, so they lie.
Yeah, that's not a new thing. That's the old thing also. But sometimes you're allowed to, in order not to be embarrassed, but not to cause any mikshal to anybody, not to cause them to do an issur. But if a person wants to protect himself from embarrassment, sometimes it is permissible. Well, we'll go into that at a different time. Mishnah, now to Borah. A Borah kidney is Yontif. So are you allowed to select? We know that Borah is one of the 39 malachas, and for Ochel Nefesh that we're saying now Yontif. So are you allowed to? We're going through all these Mishnahs. We're saying that it's not always absolutely mutar Ochel Nefesh. Each one has its own Hagdara. So what's the halacha Borah? If somebody is selecting legumes, I guess from the stones, pebbles, whatever is mixed in over there, dirt, so Beishamai says, take the good and eat. That means same as Shabbos. You have to take the good from the bad and eat. So no permission more on Yom Tov than on Shabbos. Excuse me.
And you're buried the oichel.
Right. The first word is ochel, food, ochel, and eat. It's not the same word. Ochel, it says ochel or ochel, and mila'el milra. Ochel is food. Ochel is to eat. Ochel, ochel. Select the good, select the food, and eat. Select the kitties. Don't take away the pebbles. Take away the food. Take the food and eat.
And you can't leave it for Shabbos or for.
In other words, you're saying that you're only allowed to take the good from the bad, which is the same as Shabbos, and there's no heter of borer on Yom Tov. They say, do what you want, whatever the normal way. If the normal way is take out the pebbles, you're not going to take the good from the bad. Take the bad from the good. Do whatever's normal. Also, he tells you allowed to do a lot. The knon, the tamchoy, different kind of tools that they would use for selecting. You're allowed to do that. But not with some kind of a big. Sometimes they say the table is a table sometimes, but it means not something that you select a large quantity, a sieve, a sifter, that you're not allowed to use. But you're allowed to take even the bad from the good, and even with some kind of a tool, but not the real professional tools that are made for a big quantity. Some machlokas, according to Beishamai, no heter bora. According to Beisil, yes, you could take kedarka, which means even the bad from the good. There might be and then there's a restriction not to use real professional tools, but even unprofessional tools you're allowed to use also. The diak would mean that you pour water onto it and take out. So as Rashi the Gemara is going to say, that when you put water into some things, so the bed, the psolos will flow to the top, and the good will stay at the bottom. What opposite? Sometimes the good goes to the top and the bad stays on the bottom. That's also a way of selecting, and it's even a bit professional way. That's a good way of doing it. Tanakam holds you're not allowed to do that, but Rabbi Gamliel holds you're allowed to do that also. Rabbi Gamliel says, even that means Tanakam didn't hold it that. I think we don't pass like Rabbi Gamliel, you're not allowed to do that kind of selection on Yom Tov, but you can do the first way, take the bad from the good. The Bryce Gemara continues. Tanya, Rabbi Gamliel, when is it mutter to take the bad from the good? When the good was more than the bad, which is a usual case that you have ochel mubal apsolas. So what's the easier way to select? Take the bad. You have a lot of peas and some pebbles, a few pebbles. Take out the pebbles because the ochel meruba. Apsolas mubal ochel. If you have more psolas than the good, so then everybody says take the good from the bad. So far it sounds pretty simple. That it's easier to take the bad, take the bad. If it's easier to take the good, take the good. So there's no Israel borer, and whatever's easier. But the master kasha, psolos mubal ochel mi'ikar in the shari. The way we have the gear, so this is Rashi's gear, so the way we have it, and Rashi learns the master kasha is if it's psolos mubal ochel, then everything's asa. And Rashi explains that nothing's mutter because even the ochel becomes muktzah. If the psolos is muktzah, and if it's psolos mubal ochel, even the ochel is going to become batel and also become muktzah. You're not allowed to take anything. So why are you talking about taking the good from the bad from the good? You can't take anything. Everything became bad. So the Gemara answers, the case is that it really ochel mubal psolos. According to Rashi, if it's psolos mubal ochel, the whole thing is going to become batel and aser. The whole thing is muktzah. The case is that you have ochel mubal psolos, and it says sometimes you have to take the ochel. What is the case? If it's the psolos is meruba, doesn't mean that the psolos is more in quantity. It means nafesh b'tircha, that it's more difficult. It's more difficult to take the psolos away. Zuta b'shura, it is less in the quantity. It's less than the ochel. But so according to Rashi, the way Rashi learns the Gemara, if you have psolos mubal ochel, so then the whole thing becomes muktzah. Don't take anything. If it's ochel mubal psolos, take whatever is easier. If it's easier to take the ochel, take the ochel. If it's easier to take the psolos, take the psolos. The usual case, if you have ochel mubal psolos, so then it's easier to take the psolos because it's less of a quantity. But sometimes it could be that one of them is finely ground. It's harder to take that if the psolos is finely ground. So even though it might be less, but it's harder to take that away. Take away the good. So the way Rashi comes out in the Gemara on Yom Tov, you do whatever's easier. That's Rashi's. But to point out, in the Shulchan Aruch says a little different than Rashi based on a different gersa. You have the word pshita before the word miika. They put the word pshita, and they don't know it has something to do with muktzah, but miika man the shori, miika pshita, miika man the shori. And unless I'm going to say short, if anybody wants to look into it, as far as halacha l'maisa, if there is psolos mubal ochel, psolos mubal, how does it go? if it's psolos mubal ochel, you must take the ochel even if it's harder. So I would like to sum up the Hilchos Bora and Yantif. Usually it's ochel mubal psolos. Usually ochel mubal psolos, so you take the easier one, which is the psolos. And that's the big chiddush. And Shabbos, you're not allowed to do that. Shabbos always take the ochel from the psolos. And Yantif, you take psolos from ochel. But if it's psolos mubal ochel, you must take the ochel even if it's more difficult. This interesting thing, Shmir Shabbos Kol Chasa, he wrote first simply, he wrote on Yantif, take whatever's easier. But then in a later edition, he said I made a mistake and he corrected it. That if the psolos mubal ochel, you must take the ochel even if it's more difficult. I don't know. If anybody can think of an application that we have, I couldn't think of anything that you have a case which is psolos mubal ochel, and it's harder to take away the psol. It's harder to take away the ochel, and you still have to do that. So I don't know, but go ahead.
Is the svara because the psolos being the rov it could be nefak the whole thing to muksa or to?
No, that's Rashi. That's Rashi. That whole thing becomes muksa. We don't pass like Rashi. Rashi says that the whole thing is us, and that's not a question of taking one or the other. You can't take anything. The whole thing is muksa. That's what Rashi learns the Gemara, that if the psolos mubal ochel, the whole thing is muksa. But we don't pass like Rashi, and it doesn't become batal, and the part that's not muksa is not muksa. And the only question is which one to be bora. So the halacha is going to be take the ochel.
But what is this svara?
The next case. What?
What is the svara that if it's psolos merubal oichel, you have to take the oichel? What is the how do you touch up the mixture then?
Why should it be that way? I don't know. Good. I don't know. This what it does now is a Ran. The Ran brings it down. That's how we baskin. And Shulchan Aruch says like that. So we said that the way would be to put it into water, and one is going to go to the top, one is going to go to the bottom. This is the way the household of Rabbi Gamliel did on Yantif. They would bring a bucket full of adashim, lentils, and they would put water. They fill up with water, and then the food, the lentils would go to the bottom, and the psolos would go to the top, and they would take it off, and they're only allowed to do that. We're not allowed to do that. That's too much already. Even though we all that you're allowed to be more, but not like that. But Tanya Ipcha, this is a kasha, and that's not a kasha on the halachas, that's a kasha on the Metzias, that the Bryce says the opposite, that the food went to the top and the psolos went to the bottom. Lo kasha, ba'afra, bagili. Depends what kind of psolos you have. If it's earth, the earth goes to the bottom. If it's straw, the straw goes to the top. And the lentils, I guess it depends how long you leave it over there. In the beginning, it goes to the bottom, and then maybe it soaks up the water and it starts floating to the top. Whatever the case would be, this is only a Metzias, it's not a halacha, that one flows to the bottom. Sometimes it goes to the bottom, to the top. So this is a way of separating. On Shabbos, you're not allowed to do it. And we all, even on Yantif, you're not allowed to do that. We're allowed to do it on Yantif. If we can go a little bit further, it's easy Gemara till the end, and also very interesting. And if we can catch up a little bit, we're still a daf behind, but instead of being a daf and a quarter, let's go a little bit further. We know about Shalach Manas, but everybody knows Shalach Manas is Purim. But here it talks about Shalach Manas on Yantif. And it was a custom to send presents, and it's called Mishloach Manos. And really, it's a pasuk in Nehemiah. It says on Rosh Hashanah that everyone was crying, and he says the famous pasuk, Al Te'atzevu, Ki Kadosh Hayom L'Adonenu, V'al Te'atzevu, Ki Chedvus Hashem Hi Moschem. Over there it says, Shulchu Manos La'en Achon Lo. Send present portions to somebody didn't prepare. Send them presents. Send them a portion. So that's the issue of Shulchu Manos. And it used to be a custom that people would send presents to each other on Yantif. I don't think the custom is so much relevant anymore. People do send presents maybe before Yantif, but it used to be that on Yantif they would send presents. And here's the Mishnah, what are you allowed to send? You only can send ready-to-eat portions. That whatever you send on Yantif has to be ready to eat. If it needs preparation, don't send it. It looks more than you're doing it for the weekday. Don't send it on Yantif if it's not ready to eat. It still says you can send even things that are not ready to eat as long as it's possible to prepare on Yantif. So you can send a live animal. You look at these examples. You send a behemoth, what a present. Or a deer, you have a chaya. You send a deer to your friend, and the beautiful present, expensive present, and he'll shecht it himself. According to Beis Shammai, it has to be only food that's ready to eat. It has to be probably cooked already also. But according to Beis Hillel, even if it's not cooked, and even if it's live, and he'll take care of it. He'll shecht it. He'll do everything you have to do. You can send all these kind of things: wine, oil, solas that still has to be baked, and kidneys, legumes has to be cooked. That's all fine. Because tevuah, what do you do with tevuah? What do you do with grain? You grind it, make flour. and then make it into a bread. You're not allowed to grind on Yantif. So even according to Bistelo, it's also because it's not possible to prepare on Yantif. So then it's only a present for the weekday that you're not allowed to do. It has to be something which is roy to eat today. Rab Shimon Matir B'Tfuah, Rab Shimon-
Because that's hachana.
It's tochen. No, it's what do you mean? It's tochen. Tochen. Even though with Ochel Nefesh, that's what we saw a few times in all these Mishnayos, that tochen, Ochel Nefesh is not across the board. You don't say I'm doing it for food. I'm allowed to do. There are many things you're not allowed to do. You sure you're not allowed to can't harvest from the ground and say Ochel Nefesh, even though you might say why not? But no, some things they did not permit. They say in general that it's not tircha. It's going to be Issa Deraisa. Tircha Yisera would be the tircha Rabbanan, but this is Issa Deraisa. Tomat Yantif. Tomat Yantif. But we're talking about Yantif. It says it's Issa Deraisa to do certain malachas and Yantif. It's not going to be only Rabbanan tircha. It's going to be Deraisa. And why? Because Ochel Nefesh is not across the board. Some things they ask.
Rebbe, exactly why I said a pepper grinder should be usher, and you said no. That's teichen.
I'm not sure what you're talking, but he said that some things are mutter, some things are also. So the Mishnah said before by tochen that you're allowed to do things, allowed to be tochen spices. I'm not saying everything's us. I'm saying some things are something, some things are mutter. Let's give examples. I said kotza. I said to go to the field and harvest something from the ground, you're not allowed to do because they do not matter everything for ochel nefesh. So the Mishnah said before as far as tochen, you are allowed to do spices. So your case of the peppercorns are spices, so it should be mutter. I'm not sure what you meant to ask. Here we're talking, then we spoke about Bora. We say the Bora is also mutter. In general, the Mefarshim talk about maybe the difference is something which is done on a home scale, that's permissible. If it's done on a factory scale, it's usher. Like when you harvest in the field, you don't do that in the home. You don't do it for one meal. You do it on a big scale. So that might be the criteria what's mutter, what's usher. But we have to have the Gemaras each time to say what's mutter, what's usher. Anyway.
Rabbi Lezer who holds Machshir Mitzvah is mutter, that would be permissible.
We're not talking about, it's a different subject altogether. We're talking about Ochel Nefesh. If there's some, Machshir Mitzvah is not doing a, Machshir Mitzvah, you need a lulav, you need a lulav. Are you allowed to cut the lulav off? But that's not doing Ochel Nefesh. It's a different subject. It's the whole Masechta, but the Ochel Nefesh means you're doing it for food. If you're allowed to cut down a lulav because you're doing it for the mitzvah, that's a different subject. But we're talking about Ochel Nefesh here. So Ochel Nefesh is not across the board. It's saying what's mutter, what's asa. You're sure you're not allowed to grind wheat in order to make flour out of it, and therefore you're not allowed to send wheat tvua because the recipient is not going to be able to use it on Yontif. So if Beis Shammai says you only can send them ready to eat, Beis Hillel says you can send them even not ready to eat as long as it's possible to prepare, that the recipient will prepare it. But if something is not allowed to do on Yontif, so then Beis Hillel holds you can't send it to him. Reb Shimon Matir B'Tvua, Reb Shimon says you could send tvua, and the Gemara is going to say soon why, because he also agrees it has to be edible on Yontif, and he's going to say that tvua is also edible on Yontif. We'll see soon. Tani Rav Yechiel. Yechiel said over a brisa that says it will actually send a b'shua, even though you're allowed to send presents, but don't send it with a delegation. That's too much. Rashi says delegation. Rashi says a pshat. Why is delegation also? Because it might look like you're going to the market. One is the seller, one is the buyer. It looks too much. So don't send it with a delegation. Tana, ein shua pchusim mishlosha b'nei. What's a delegation? 3 people. It comes up also by Hilchos Yom Kippur that the person, if he has to ask mechila, it should be a shura. Each one is 3 times, 3 people. But here's talking about a shura of a delegation. Don't send a present on Yontif with a delegation. Vayra Bashi, Tlasa Gabi with Tlasa Mini Mai, take you. But if you send 3 people, but not only 1 present, 3 presents, each person has 1 present, is that considered a delegation of 3, or it's 3 presents that are sent by 3 people that happen to be going together? Take you, we're not sure about that. And the Rambam says you could be mekel because it's just a Rabbanan, so he's mekel that you can send 3 presents with 3 people, but don't send 1 present with 3 people. Reb Shimon Matir B'Tvua. Reb Shimon says you could send tvua even though usually it's made for bread and you're not allowed to grind on Yontif. Why is he matir? Tanya, Reb Shimon Matir B'Tvua, chitim lasos man ludios. So Rashi says ludios is some kind of a porridge or something like that you cook the kernels. So you're allowed to cook, you're just not allowed to grind. So Reb Shimon says even though it's true that usually grain, kernels of wheat are usually used for making bread, and that you're not allowed to do on Yontif, but it could be that he's going to use it for something else which is permissible on Yontif, so therefore you're allowed to send it also. Also, Somli Tein Lefnei Behemto, and Adash and Lasas Man Vesisin, that you're allowed to send these other things also, even though, again, Sora might be usually used for bread, but no, it is usable for the animals, so you're allowed to send it on Yontif. Adashim, Chavis Pashat, that lentils are used to make some kind of a dish, so it's surely permissible. Some make it a little bit easier, the Gersa, to take out these 4 words. Sora and Lasas Man Vesisin. Chita and Lasas Ben Ludio, Saul and Lasas Ben Resisa, the bit better girsa that Rabbeinu Hananel has that the issue of saurim is because usually it's made for bread, and the heter is because you could also make some kind of a porridge out of it that you just have to cook, and that's permissible. So in Kitzur, what are we paskin? Paskin like this Hillel, that it has to be something which is edible. It doesn't have to be ready to eat. It could be that the recipient is going to prepare it, but it has to be something which is permissible to do. And tefua is not usual to use in that way. You don't cook it. Usually you grind it, and therefore it's also, so you're not allowed to send that. The Mishnah continues, I don't think that you're allowed to send not only presents of food, you can also send all kinds of presents. Mishalchim Kedim, you can send garments, bein tfurim, bein sheina tfurim, both if they're sewn to become a full garment, even if it's just yeah. Sometimes it means vessels, but here you see tfurim, not tfurim, so you see that it's, so you can send kelim also, you can send all kinds of vessels, but even a garment which is not sewn, like a piece of cloth. And there was no talk, what are you going to do with a piece of cloth? You can't sew on Yom Tov. Even if it's shatnez, the Gemara is going to say that it's usable. We have to find a case where shatnez is going to be usable. If it's not usable, so then you can't send it. According to our gear says dafke, if it's something which can be used on the moed, there's a different gear that says even though it's not tzarech hamoed, we leave the gear that we have that it has to be tzarech hamoed. Avol, but you can't send things that are not usable on Yom Tov. You can't send a sandal masuma. Some we have that in Shabbos Taf Samach. Sandal, Masum, all kinds of samachs, Shabbos, Taf Samach. Over there it talks about a sandal that has nails in it in a way that it said you're not allowed to wear it on Shabbos, and the Gemara talks about why they made such a gzeira. You're not allowed to wear it on Yom Tov either. It says you're not allowed to wear it on Yom Tov, so then don't send it because you're not allowed to use it today. Also, Minal Shein the Tofur, you send them a not finished shoe. It's a shoe which has not yet been completely sewn up yet, so you can't use it. A beg that's not tough, the Gemara is going to say it's possible to use, but a shoe that's not, it's not possible to use. Rabbi Yehuda says you can't even send a shoe which has not yet been polished. If it's a white shoe, which hasn't been made black yet, so no one's going to wear an unpainted shoe because you need a uman. It has to be painted. You can't paint it on Yom Tov. So therefore, it's also the kid says the same thing. This is the rule of the thumb over here. Anything which is usable on Yom Tov, you're allowed to send it. If it's not usable, you can't. The Osen would be like to be nana. Anything can be nana from Yom Tov, you're allowed to use it. If you can't, then you're not allowed to send it. The Gemara is going to talk about the way to read it. But so far, I read it the way the Pasha says, anything which is usable on Yom Tov, you're allowed to send. If it's not, you're not allowed to. So the Gemara goes to explain what are you going to do with a piece of cloth that's not sewn to a garment? If it's sewn, so you could wear it as a garment. Even if it's not sewn as a piece of cloth, you could use it to cover the person, or to use it as a tablecloth, whatever. You can use it to cover something. So it's usable. But what could you do with shatnez? What could you do with shatnez? To say, if you think that it's possible to fold it up under him, means he's allowed to sit or lie on top of shatnez. You can't go under the shatnez. Maybe you can go on top of the shatnez. No, you're not allowed to do that either. But Tanya, the Raisa says, the Raisa, it's only us if it's on top of you. It shouldn't go on top of you. Beged shatnez. What does it say? Beged. I forgot the Lashon exactly. There's another person. It's only us if it's on top of you, but it is permissible to spread out beneath you with the Raisa. But I want to say not allowed to because it might wrap on him a cloth of this, a thread of this cloth on his skin. I mean, it might flip over on top of him. So it says, you're not allowed to put shanis even under you. So what are you going to do with this piece of shanis? Maybe it's permissible if you have something in between, that you have a sheet of shanis, and then on top of it you put a different kind of cloth, and then you're allowed to be on top of it? No, that's also awesome. Even if you have 10 spreads, and Shabbos is the bottom one, and on top of you have another 9 spreads, or 10 on top of that, 10 also is asa. Everything's asa. So what are you going to do with the Shabbos over here? Ela b'vilo, maybe by a curtain. That a curtain can be used for Shabbos. Why not? No one's getting warmed up by it. No, you're not allowed to use a curtain of Shabbos either. If they ma'amu vilo and tamei, b'nei shashamash v'schanim kenegdo. A vilo is mekabel tumah because it is used sometimes by the servant, the shamash, to wrap himself up. It's cold, and he doesn't. So he goes about a curtain and he wraps himself up. So for the same reason, it's just for Shabbos. Nowadays, I haven't seen it, but the Gemara says that people don't do that nowadays. I think that they don't wrap themselves in a curtain. Maybe the halacha changed, but here the Gemara says that vilon is also to be Shabbos. So the Gemara is still wondering what is the. Am I missing the daf? Do I have the next daf? Ela Bakashin. Okay, I don't know if I have it over here. 1 second. No, I don't think I made the next daf already. so I didn't fit it on the screen. Ella Bekashin. So the Gemara ends off that if it would be a kind of a material which is not soft, it's hard, it's a hard kind of a material, which means that it doesn't warm a person. And then there's no Isser Shanis. That's two lines. Yeshua said, felt of a place called Narash, which is hard. Rashi says the word Namta means felt, and Gamda means kasher. And Narash is the name of a place. So he says it's mutter. So a kitzur, if it's a kind of a cloth that doesn't give off, it's not soft in a way that it contains the heat. So it's mutter, it's not also because of shanas. Rashi says it's only mutter to be on top of it, not to put it on you. And Taisus talks about maybe it's mutter even to wear also, that it doesn't hold in the heat. And it's only considered shanas that's usher only if it is a soft material which would contain contain the heat. Okay, that's Gemara. We cut up a little bit, but we have another daf to catch up.
Tomorrow night?
So tomorrow night, what time would everybody like to meet? We should have a good Yom Kippur. Anybody have a suggestion of a time?
What time is in Kippur over? 7:30? Okay. You have to eat.
Shaul, if you want to ask a question, please do. Oh, okay. Well, we could talk after the class. So, or maybe I could. You could type it, or
7:23 is the fastest over.
or I could answer the phone afterwards.
All right.
Okay.
9:15.
Is
I had a
9:15
question.
Is 9:15?
If these things,
One second, please. Is 9:15